The lone guardian, the void of space trembled as the Zarian Empire's war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Terran system. 5,000 vessels of varying sizes materialized in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls catching starlight like deadly prisms. At the fleet's heart, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion pulsed with ominous energy, its weapon arrays already charging for the inevitable conquest. Fleet Commander Zethkar stood in the command center of his flagship, his forearms crossed behind his back as he surveyed the tactical displays. His species had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade, each victory swift and decisive. The humans would be no different, or so he believed. Commander, his tactical officer Vextal reported, his voice carrying the characteristic harmonic undertones of their species. Long-range sensors detect minimal defensive activity in the inner system. Their orbital platforms appear to be standard military grade, nothing we haven't encountered before. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. As expected, the humans are a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. They lack the experience to mount any meaningful resistance. He gestured toward the holographic display, showing Earth's pale blue dot in the distance. Begin the standard intimidation protocol. Broadcast our terms of surrender on all frequencies. But as the fleet's communication array transmitted the ultimatum, something unexpected happened. A single ship emerged from the shadow of Earth's moon, moving with purposeful intent toward the massive alien armada. The vessel appeared modest, compared to the Zarian dreadnoughts, sleek and angular, with a metallic hull that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Sir, Vextal's voice carried a note of confusion. We're detecting only one human vessel approaching our position. Designation appears to be U-East Prometheus. Zethkar's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary pair focused on the tactical readout. One ship? That's all humanity sent? He let out a sound that might have been laughter if his species were capable of such an expression. Perhaps they're offering their flagship as a gesture of immediate surrender. Aboard the used Prometheus, Captain Elena Vasquez stood calmly on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the approaching alien fleet. Unlike the frantic activity one might expect from a crew facing impossible odds, her team worked with quiet efficiency. There was something different about them, something that spoke of confidence rather than desperation. Distance to the Zarian fleet? Vasquez asked, her voice steady. 12 million kilometers and closing, Captain, replied her navigation officer, Lieutenant Commander James Park. His fingers danced across the holographic interface with practiced precision. They're maintaining formation, likely expecting. Used to turn back or transmit surrender terms. Vasquez smiled, expression that held no trace of fear. Let them maintain their expectations a little longer. Dr. Chun, status on our primary systems? Chief Science Officer Dr. Lisa Chun looked up. From her station, her auburn hair catching the bridge's soft lighting. All neural networks are operating at optimal capacity, Captain. The quantum processing cores are synchronized, and our adaptive protocols are ready for engagement. Excellent. Vasquez turned to her tactical officer. Mr. Torres, please open. A channel to the Zarian flagship. The view screen shimmered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Fleet Commander Zethkar. His alien features were both magnificent and terrifying, with 4 eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen and mandibles that clicked with obvious irritation. I am Fleet Commander Zethkar of the Zarian Empire, the alien leader announced, his voice translated through universal protocols. You'll state your intentions, human. Do you come to offer your species surrender? Vasquez stepped forward, her posture respectful but unafraid. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Prometheus. I come to represent humanity. In these proceedings, Commander Zethkar. One ship, Zethkar repeated, his mandibles clicking more rapidly. Your leaders send one ship to face my armada? This is either the height of arrogance or the depth of foolishness. Perhaps, Vasquez replied calmly, it's simply confidence. The transmission ended as Zethkar cut the connection, clearly unimpressed by what he perceived as human bravado. But as the Prometheus continued its approach, something began to trouble the Zerion commander. His sensors were picking up unusual readings from the human vessel. Vextal, run a deep scan on that ship. Something about it doesn't match our intelligence. Reports on human technology. The tactical officer's claws worked frantically over his controls. Sir, the readings are ... unusual. The ship's power signature is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be generating some form of quantum field that's interfering with our sensors. Impossible, Zethkar growled. Human technology is primitive compared to ours. They've barely mastered faster-than-light travel. But as if to contradict his words, the Prometheus suddenly executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for any ship its size. The vessel seemed to fold space around itself, appearing instantly several thousand kilometers closer to the Zerion fleet. No acceleration, no visible propulsion trail, just instantaneous translation through space. What sorcery is this? Zethkar demanded, his forearms now gesturing wildly. No known technology can achieve spatial displacement without massive energy. Expenditure. On the Prometheus bridge, the crew watched the alien fleet's confusion with quiet satisfaction. Vasquez nodded to Dr. Chan, who began entering commands into her console. Initiating adaptive shielding protocols, Sean announced. All defensive systems are now learning and adjusting to potential Zerion weapon signatures. As if reading her. Intent, several Zerion vessels fired warning shots toward the Prometheus. Brilliant beams of energy that could vaporize mountains struck the human ship's shields, creating spectacular light displays. But when the energy dissipated, the Prometheus remained completely undamaged. More concerning for the Zerions was what happened next. The human ship's shields began to shift and change, taking on a crystalline appearance that looked remarkably similar to Zerion technology. It was as if the ship had analyzed their weapons and adapted its defenses accordingly. Impossible! Vextal exclaimed. Our quantum disruptors should have overloaded any known shielding technology. Zethkar watched in growing unease as the Prometheus began to move through his fleet formation, seemingly immune to the increasingly desperate weapons fire directed at it. Each shot only seemed to make the human ship's defenses stronger and more sophisticated. Commander, another officer reported, the human vessel is scanning our ships. But not with any technology we recognize. It's as if they're learning our designs in real time. The true shock came when the Prometheus began to communicate directly with individual Zerion vessels, bypassing their command structure entirely. The ship seemed to know the names and histories of individual crew members, speaking to them in their own language variants and dialects. Attention crew of the vessel Star's Edge, came Captain Vasquez's voice directly onto the bridge of a Zerion. Destroyer, your ship's quantum matrix is showing signs of instability. You may want to check your port energy coupling before it causes a cascade failure. The destroyer's captain, a young Zerion officer named Kivtar, stared in shock at his instruments. The human was correct. How could she possibly know about an internal malfunction that his own engineers hadn't detected? Similar communications were occurring throughout the fleet, with the Prometheus offering technical advice, sharing information about crew members' families, and even commenting on cultural traditions from various Zerion worlds. It was as if the single human ship somehow knew everything about every individual in the 5,000-ship armada. Zethkar found himself increasingly disturbed by these developments. This wasn't the behavior of a desperate last stand or even advanced technology. This was something else entirely, something that challenged his understanding of warfare itself. Sir, Vextol reported with obvious confusion. The human ship is now broadcasting on frequencies that don't exist in our technical manuals. It's creating new communication protocols in real time. As if to punctuate this impossibility, the Prometheus began to replicate itself, not through any visible manufacturing process, but by converting cosmic dust and debris around it into coherent matter. Within minutes, there were 2 identical vessels, then 4, then 8. Fleet Commander, came an urgent transmission from one of his destroyer captains. The human ships are not attacking us, but they're demonstrating capabilities that violate several laws of physics. My science officer believes they may be using some form of consciousness transfer technology. Zethkar's blood ran cold. Consciousness transfer was theoretical, even for the advanced Zerion Empire. If the humans had mastered such technology, it would explain the impossible knowledge and adaptive capabilities they were witnessing. As the number of Prometheus vessels continued to multiply, Captain Vasquez's image appeared on every screen throughout the Zerion fleet simultaneously. But now there was something different about her expression, something that spoke of vast knowledge and infinite patience. "Commander Zethkar," she said, her voice reaching every member of his armada, "I believe it's time we had a proper conversation about what humanity really is and what we're truly capable of when we work together." The transmission ended, leaving the entire Zerion fleet in stunned silence as they contemplated the implications of what they had just witnessed. This was no longer a simple conquest. This was an encounter with something that challenged everything. They thought they knew about warfare, technology, and the nature of consciousness itself. Asterisk the revelation. The silence that followed Captain Vasquez's transmission stretched across the Zerion fleet like a held breath. 5,000 ships hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. The single human vessel had become dozens, each one identical to the original, yet somehow distinct in its movements and behavior. Fleet Commander Zethkar stood rigid in his command center, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed the impossible multiplication of enemy vessels. His mandibles clicked nervously as he tried to process the implications. "Sir," Vextol reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "the human ships are arranging themselves in a formation I've never seen before. It's not defensive or offensive. It's almost like they're preparing for some kind of ... presentation." Before Zethkar could respond, every screen throughout his fleet activated simultaneously. Captain Vasquez appeared, but now she stood not on a ship's bridge, but in what appeared to be a vast digital space filled with swirling patterns of light and data. Behind her, ghostly figures of other humans flickered in and out of existence, as if she were surrounded by the shadows of an entire civilization. "Commander Zethkar, warriors of the Zerion Empire," Vasquez began, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to encompass eons of experience. "You came here expecting to conquer a primitive species. You expected to find a young civilization clinging to a single world, desperate and afraid. What you found instead was something your intelligence networks never could have predicted." She gestured, and the space around her transformed into a holographic representation of Earth. But this wasn't the planet as the Zerians had seen it from their long-range sensors. This Earth pulsed with energy, its surface covered in a network of light that spoke of unprecedented technological integration. 3 years ago, Vasquez continued, our deep space monitoring stations detected the advanced scouts of your empire. We knew you were coming, and we knew we couldn't defeat you through conventional warfare. Your technology, your numbers, your experience in conquest all far exceeded our own. Zethkar found himself leaning forward, despite his efforts to maintain composure. The human's words carried the ring of truth, but they also suggested something that challenged his fundamental understanding of how civilizations responded to overwhelming force. So we made a choice, Vasquez said, and now her image was joined by dozens of other humans, each one distinct, yet somehow connected to the others. We chose not to fight you as separate individuals, but as something greater, something that had never been attempted in the history of consciousness itself. Dr. Chun stepped forward from among the crowd of figures, her form solidifying as she began to speak. We developed the Prometheus Protocol, a quantum consciousness transfer system that could preserve not just individual minds, but the connections between them. Every volunteer's memories, knowledge, creativity, and personality were uploaded into a quantum matrix that became the ship's living consciousness. Lieutenant Commander Park appeared next, his image flickering with streams of data. We're not artificial intelligences mimicking human behavior. We are humans, as real as we ever were, but existing in a digital space that allows us to share thoughts, memories, and capabilities instantaneously. Zethkar's primary arms crossed over his chest, a gesture of deep contemplation among his species. You're claiming that your single ship contains the consciousness of multiple individuals? This is fantasy, not science. Captain Vasquez smiled, and in that expression, Zethkar could see something that transcended mere confidence. It was the smile of someone who carried the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Is it fantasy? She asked. Your own scans have detected quantum processing cores throughout the ship. You've witnessed our ability to adapt and learn in real time. You've seen us replicate ourselves using available matter. Most importantly, you've experienced our knowledge of your individual crew members, their histories, their fears, and their hopes. As if to demonstrate her point, she turned to address a specific Zarian vessel. Captain Drixville of the Crimson Talon, your daughter Zixara just had her first molt 3 cycles ago. You carry her picture in your personal effects, and you worry that this campaign will keep you from seeing her grow into a warrior worthy of your lineage. The camera view switched to show Captain Drixville, a scarred veteran whose mandibles trembled with emotion. His bridge crew stared at him in amazement, knowing that this personal information couldn't possibly be known to any human database. How? Drixville whispered, his voice carried across the fleet communication network. Vasquez's expression grew gentle. Because among the consciousness patterns that make up this ship is Dr. Sarah Martinez, a xenanthropologist who spent her life studying interspecies family structures. She understands the love of a parent for their child, regardless of species. That understanding is now part of who we are. The implications of her words began to settle over the Zarian fleet like a revelation. This wasn't just advanced technology, or even consciousness transfer. This was something fundamentally new in the universes, the amalgamation of an entire species' knowledge, creativity, and emotional understanding into a collective that maintained individual identity while sharing collective wisdom. You see, Dr. Chon continued, when humans face extinction, we don't just fight, we adapt, we innovate, we become something new while remaining fundamentally ourselves. The space around the human figures transformed again, showing scenes from Earth's history. Humans working together to build massive structures, sharing knowledge across continents, creating art and literature that captured the essence of their experience. Our greatest strength was never our technology or our military might, Vasquez explained. It was our ability to cooperate, to share knowledge, to build something greater than the sum of our parts, while maintaining our individual creativity and spirit. Zethkar watched in fascination as the Prometheus vessels began to demonstrate their capabilities in earnest. They didn't simply replicate themselves. They began transforming cosmic debris into useful materials, creating new technologies by combining human ingenuity with matter manipulation on a quantum level. We could destroy your fleet, Vasquez said matter-of-factly, but that would make us something we choose not to be. Instead, we offer you something that has never been offered to the Zarian Empire before. And what is that? Zethkar asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the arrogance that had marked their first encounter. Partnership, she replied simply. We know why your empire conquers other worlds. Your homeworld's resources are depleting, and your population needs new territories to survive. But what if instead of conquest, we could offer you something better? What if we could share our knowledge of matter manipulation, of quantum consciousness, of technologies that could restore your homeworld and eliminate the need for expansion through warfare? The fleet communication networks buzzed with excited chatter as Xerian crew members discussed the implications. Their empire had been locked in conquest mode for generations, believing it was the only path to survival. The idea of cooperation rather than domination was revolutionary. Vextal approached his commander with obvious confusion. Sir, their offer could be genuine. Our scientists have confirmed that the matter manipulation we're witnessing is real. If they could teach us these techniques— Zethkar raised a hand for silence, his mind racing through the possibilities. Captain Vasquez, he said finally, your proposal is intriguing. But how do we know you won't simply use these technologies against us once we lower our guard? The answer came not from Vasquez alone, but from what appeared to be hundreds of Vandres. Human consciousness patterns speaking in unison. Because we are no longer capable of deception on that scale, Commander. When you share consciousness with others, when your thoughts and motivations are transparent, certain types of betrayal become impossible. A new figure stepped forward from among the human collective, an elderly man with kind eyes and weathered features. I'm Dr. Robert Kim, formerly director of Earth's diplomatic corps. In my 90 years of life, I learned that the only lasting victories are those that benefit all parties involved. That wisdom is now part of our collective understanding. The demonstration that followed was unlike anything the Xerian Empire had ever witnessed. The Prometheus vessels began working together to transform a nearby asteroid field into a functioning space station, complete with docking facilities and resource processing centers. The construction took mere hours and utilized techniques that violated several fundamental laws of physics as the Xerians understood them. This is what we offer, Vasquez said as the completed station gleamed in the starlight. Not conquest, but cooperation. Not domination, but mutual growth. We can teach you these techniques, share our knowledge, and work together to build something neither of our species could achieve alone. Zethkar found himself facing a decision that would reshape the future of his empire. The traditional path of conquest suddenly seemed not just unnecessary, but primitive compared to what the humans were offering. You're asking us to fundamentally change who we are as a species, he said slowly. No, Vasquez replied with a smile that somehow conveyed the warmth of an entire civilization. We're asking you to become who you were always meant to be. Warriors not of conquest, but of creation. Explorers not of domination, but of discovery. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet of earlier. This was the silence of contemplation, of a species collectively realizing that they stood at a crossroads that could lead to something greater than they had ever imagined. Finally, Zethkar spoke, his voice carrying across every ship in his fleet. Captain Vasquez, on behalf of the Xerian Empire, I would like to formally request negotiations. The response came not as words, but as a wave of joy and relief that seemed to emanate from every Prometheus vessel simultaneously. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had turned potential extinction into the foundation for interspecies cooperation. As the two fleets began the delicate process of establishing peaceful contact, one thing became clear. The universe had just witnessed the birth of something new, a partnership between species that promised to unlock possibilities neither could have achieved alone. And it all began with a single ship that carried the dreams and determination of an entire world, The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.